What's up guys, Apoxy here, and welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today, I'm going to be going into detail on why you should be maining Arc Warlock in PvP and PvE right now, and what builds I like to use. If you enjoy this new series, make sure to like and subscribe for more future videos, and I'll top right in. Starting with the PvP side of things, I can't even lie, Arc Warlock is 1000% my favorite class to use when I want to be at my best. From all the different aspects, fragments, exotics, and build I like to use to make the subclass super fun, I'm going to be going over it all. Starting with my go-to for PvP, we have a build that consists of the exotic known as Getaway Artist and matching it up with a solid exotic weapon such as the Centrifuge. But of course, any arc weapon will fit this build, so it's really up to you. But this matchup works super well together and makes for a very fun build that allows you to be very aggressive in the Crucible. Jumping straight into the build, when it comes to Arc Warlocks, they would 100% have one of the most insane powered melees in the game. The aspect known as Lightning Surge makes it so your powered melee allows you to blink forward, causing a decent amount of damage to your opponents in range. And let me tell you, this is my favorite melee ability in the game because it is very strategic and can be used to secure kills and get jumps on enemies who will not be expecting you to attack so aggressively. When using this ability correctly, you can make some pretty insane plays and get away with a lot of free kills, and that's why I really enjoy this part of the build. But going back to the exotic armor piece, when looking at the Getaway Artists and how they help this build, anytime you consume your arc grenade, you become amplified and are also granted an arc soul, and who doesn't love arc buddies? And also, if you don't know how being amplified works, while amplified, your movement speed and weapon handling are greatly increased, and after sprinting for a short time, your movement speed is increased even more, which will allow us to push insanely fast and be a speed demon in the Crucible, and all we have to do is consume our grenade. It's really as easy as that. And we're looking at the Centrifuge auto rifle, and why I like to match it with Getaway Artist, it's because of the intrinsic trait and catalyst that this weapon provides. The intrinsic trait allows us to build up an electrostatic charge by sprinting, sliding, and firing the weapon, which results in an increase in range and reload speed. And if we get final blows with high charge on the weapon, it will cause an explosion that blinds targets, which is great for us and bad for the enemies. And with the catalyst, every time we become amplified, our Centrifuge will charge even faster, which is a very big deal because of how often we can be amplified in every match, meaning our Centrifuge is going to be crazy strong for a majority of the game. Another strength this build has is being able to create a lot of ionic traces, which make us amplified and grant us ability energy upon picking them up. A way we can create a bunch of those is through our aspect known as Electrostatic Mine, which creates ionic traces anytime we defeat a jolted or blinded enemy. Lucky for us, our powered melee and two of our fragments help us make enemies jolted in our close quarter fights. The two fragments are Spark of Discharge and Spark of Instinct. Spark of Discharge makes it so that anytime we kill an enemy with our arc weapon, there is a chance we create an ionic trace, which is why I like to use Centrifuge for this build, because anytime your Centrifuge explosion goes off, you'll be blinding targets, meaning you get more ionic traces, which is good for us. Then when talking about the Spark of Instinct, while critically wounded, taking damage emits a burst of damaging arc energy that jolts targets, so another way to jolt enemies. And it's also really good with our powered melee, because if we blink in and take damage, we do our melee damage on top of the damage that comes off of this perk. So overall, it's very good to have on the build. Moving on to the third fragment we have on the build, it's called Spark of Recharge, which just makes it so that while we're critical health, our melee and grenade regenerate more quickly, which is a great quality of life fragment. And then the last fragment I like to use is a little fun one. It's called Spark of Momentum. Sliding over ammo bricks reloads your equipped weapon and grants a small amount of melee energy. So it really just helps us get our melee energy back quicker. And since I slide around so much, this is just perfect and definitely worth using. But yeah, this is all for my build. This is what it looks like if you're curious. And I also like to use Storm Trance Super just because I can use my powered melee into the super, meaning that I can really pounce on enemies and get my super off, getting a bunch of kills and able to shut down any super, which is why I like using it. Yeah, if you're curious about what all the mods I like to use in this build are, I'll have a dim link below that you can go on there and look at all of it and copy it yourself. That's all I have for the PvP side of things. Now let's move on to my PvE setup. When it comes to using Arc Warlock in PvE, there are a lot of great benefits that come with it. It's great at both ad clearing and doing an insane amount of DPS to bosses. Arc is honestly insanely slept on in a lot of raids and dungeons, but Chaos Reach is seriously one of the most consistent DPS supers in the game, especially when it's matched up with the exotic armor piece known as the Geomag Stabilizers. If you're not familiar with Geomag Stabilizers and what they're good for, their armor perk is known as Close Enough, and what it does is it extends the durations of Chaos Reach by about double the amount, causing you to do an insane amount of damage. And also the Geomag Stabilizers received a buff not too long ago that made it so anytime you pick up an ionic trace, you gain super energy towards your Chaos Reach, meaning that you'll be able to get it back quicker after using it, which definitely definitely helps a lot. If I'm being honest with you guys, no matter what boss I'm up against or what dungeon I'm doing, this is my go-to setup for DPS and ad clear. Now going into what my subclass looks like, looking at my aspects, the only thing that changed up from the last build is instead of using the electrostatic mind for my PvE build, I'm deciding to use the arc soul aspect so that I'm able to obtain arc souls anytime I cast my rifts. And a nice little bonus that this aspect provides for me is that whenever I'm amplified, my arc souls will become supercharged, meaning that the rate of fire will be greatly increased, causing them to destroy everything, and just overall make them a lot more helpful when it comes to doing damage and killing ads. And then moving on to the abilities I like to use, I prefer to use Storm Nade if it's more for an ad clear situation, but if I'm trying to get more boss DPS, I definitely would choose Pulse Grenades. And for my melee, of course, we're still using our Chain Lightning ability matched up with the Lightning Surge aspect. This is because the powered melee is extremely useful in PvE as well for clearing ads while also jolting them and chaining nearby targets, meaning that this ability will have no problem taking out groups of enemies. And then of course throw on whatever glide you prefer, and then throw on a healing rift and you're set for the abilities. Then moving on to my fragments, I'm only using 2 different fragments when comparing it to my PvP build, and they are called Spark of Shock and Spark of Volts. Spark of Shock is super helpful because it makes it so that all of my arc grenades will jolt targets and cause chain lightning, which will melt groups of enemies, which is why it's so important to have this fragment on this build. The other new fragment, known as Spark of Volts, is the key to how we'll be able to get amplified with this build. In my PvP build, we get amplified mainly from consuming our grenade, but with Spark of Volts, we get amplified every single time we perform a finisher, which means it's even easier and we can basically do it constantly without having to wait for a grenade cooldown. So this fragment just makes being amplified super accessible whenever we want it. And then for our other 2 fragments, we're bringing over some from the other build, which were Spark of Instinct and Spark of Recharge, just because they are really beneficial perks for our subclass and will help us greatly in PvE as well. But yeah, that's all for my PvE build. I will have a dim link in the description if you're curious and want to copy it yourself, but this is what it looks like so you guys can see it. I highly recommend trying this out if you haven't used it. Chaos Reach with Geomag Stabilizers is seriously an underrated combo and does a crazy amount of damage, and people really need to be trying it out more. And if you're curious how you can make this more into an ad clearing build in terms of the exotic, because obviously you don't want to be using Chaos Reach, you can take off your Geomag Stabilizers, throw on Crown of Tempest, go into your subclass, put this into Storm Trance, and you're all set. If you see here, Crown of Tempest, Arc ability or Jolt Final Blows increase the recharge rate of your Arc abilities and extend the duration of Storm Trance, because obviously Storm Trance is definitely better for ad clear because you can move around a lot more. Chaos Reach really has you stuck in place, but yeah, this is definitely the better option for ad clear, so I just thought to point that out for you guys. And if you were curious about what kind of DPS this build can put out, I can show you guys some of the numbers I have on hand. Testing it at the Grasp of Avarice Ogre with Tractor Cannon, I dropped about 900k with just the super alone. Match this up with a Pulse Grenade and you will easily be pushing over 1 million damage during your super, which is a great amount. On top of that, you can use Wither Horde and a good rocket launcher to make your damage push past 3 million at least on raid bosses such as Taniks, Rolk, Nazarek, and many more. And trust me, nothing feels better than out DPSing people who call themselves PvE mains as a PvP focused player. I've used this build for months now, and I swear to you, if you're having trouble with your DPS, this build will fix your issue. When it comes to the weapons I like to use to maximize my DPS for this build, I like to use the Cartesian Coordinate Fusion Rifle, matched up with Apex Predator Rocket Launcher. They're both solar, so I can easily run 2 solar weapon surges to make this build do a lot of damage. Or you can use a Techian Force Fusion Rifle, matched up with Thunderlord to get both arc damage and do that as well. Or whatever other good combos you have, you can do that, but this is just personally what I like to use and what gets me the high damage numbers. And then if you're curious what your armor stats should be looking like on the build, I would definitely go for high recovery and discipline, and then a decent amount of resilience for the PvP side, and a higher amount of resilience obviously for the PvE side. But of course, both the dim links for this build will be in the description below. But if you want a quick screenshot of the mods so you can guys see what I'm running, here's the PvE side, and here's the PvP side. And that's all I got for you guys when it comes to my Arc Warlock setups for PvP and PvE. I hope you guys enjoyed this newer type of video from me. If you did, make sure to comment letting me know what you'd like to see next. And until next time, peace.